Whispers in the Veil of Night. In the cold, indifferent heart of the city stood an aging commercial building whose facade bore the scars of time. Its glass windows, once bright and inviting, now stared blankly into the darkness. Inside, under the sterile hum of fluorescent lights, Marcus found himself working late into the night as the security manager, a role that promised solitude but delivered far more than he had bargained for. It began subtly. At first, there were the inexplicable sounds, a soft shuffling in the corridors, barely audible over the drone of the heating system. Marcus would lean against the wall in the storage room and listen intently, trying to decipher the source. Sometimes, he thought he heard footsteps echoing in a rhythm that wasn't his own. They were too measured, too deliberate, to be the random meanderings of an empty building. One damp autumn evening, as rain pattered against the cracked window panes, the sounds grew bolder. Marcus was in his cramped office when he heard them, ghostly footsteps marching in sync along the corridor outside. The sound reverberated through the concrete walls, drawing him out into the murky hallway. With a flashlight trembling in his hand, he followed the distant rhythm. Each step seemed to vibrate with a strange intensity, as though they belonged to someone desperate to be heard. The footsteps led him to a closed door at the end of the hall, behind which lay a vacant conference room. As he pushed the door open, the beam of his flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing an expanse of old furniture, dusty projectors, and the lingering smell of forgotten meetings. But nothing explained the sound. No one was there. Yet, in that echoing silence, Marcus felt a presence, a weight, an unseen force pressing against his mind. In the days that followed, he documented every incident in a worn leather journal. Each entry was a desperate attempt to capture the elusive details, the time when the footsteps began, the temperature drop in the corridor, the strange vibration in the floor beneath his feet. He noted that with each passing night, his own heartbeat began to sync with that persistent, measured cadence. Was it his imagination, or was the building speaking? His fear battled with a morbid curiosity. He needed to understand the unseen visitor that haunted these halls. Late one night, as he sat poring over his notes, Marcus realized the terror was not simply in the noise but in the profound sense of loss and longing that accompanied it. The footsteps were not merely a warning, they were an invitation, a plea from something lost in the folds of time, yearning to be understood. And though dread clawed at his mind, he could not help but follow their call, stepping further into the realm where reality blurred with something far older and darker. Miles away in a decaying suburban manor, Elaine lived alone with memories that haunted her much like the family portraits that lined her walls. Among these relics was an ornate antique mirror, a treasure passed down through generations, its silvered surface dulled by time and mystery. At first glance, it was a beautiful piece, a masterpiece of craftsmanship with intricate carvings of roses and thorns, an eternal testament to a bygone era. Yet, beneath its polished veneer, Elaine began to sense a malevolent force. It started on a languid summer afternoon. As Elaine sat reading in her parlor, a subtle shift in the mirror's reflection caught her eye. The room behind her, usually calm and filled with soft, natural light, seemed to warp into a landscape of sinister shadows. Faint whispers, almost too soft to catch, emerged from the mirror as if it were a portal to a forgotten past. At first, she dismissed them as tricks of the light, remnants of her tired imagination. But the experiences grew more intense with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Elaine stood before the mirror with a trembling hand. As she gazed into her own eyes, they seemed to ripple and dissolve, replaced by images of a sorrowful stranger, a person whose eyes conveyed a deep, unfathomable grief. The stranger's face was a mosaic of pain and longing, and for a moment, Elaine felt a crushing empathy for this phantom self. Was it possible that the mirror was reflecting not just her visage, but the weight of past sorrows embedded within her lineage? Haunted by these visions, Elaine began researching the mirror's origins. Old letters and faded diaries hinted at a tragic event, a forbidden love, a betrayal, and an untimely death. The mirror, it seemed, had borne witness to the darkest secrets of her family, its surface absorbing every tear and every whisper of regret. Now, in its silence, it spoke volumes, its reflections a blend of past and present, of beauty and terror. Night after night, the mirror's whispers grew louder, seeping into Elaine's mind and eroding her grasp on reality. She started to doubt whether what she saw was real or merely the projection of her own fractured memories. The mirror became both a window and a wall, offering glimpses into a spectral past while isolating her from the comforting reality of the present. Its eerie glow, illuminated by the flicker of candlelight during stormy nights, transformed the room into a theater of shadows where every movement, every reflection, seemed imbued with an ancient sorrow. Desperate for answers, Elaine reached out to a local historian. Together, they delved into the manor's records, uncovering tales of forbidden love and tragic demise. The mirror, once a symbol of family pride, had become a cursed relic, a repository of unresolved grief and anger. In a final, harrowing encounter, Elaine found herself face to face with the spectral figure in the mirror. The ghostly visage reached out, as if pleading for liberation from an endless cycle of sorrow. In that moment, Elaine understood that to reclaim her peace, she would have to confront the legacy of pain embedded in the mirror's depths, a task that would demand all her courage and resolve. Elsewhere in the city, tucked away in a small, dilapidated apartment, Jonathan's life had been quietly consumed by anxiety. His humble room was dominated by a single, archaic armchair, a relic of a more elegant era with richly patterned upholstery and carved wooden arms that once spoke of comfort and tradition. However, for as long as Jonathan could remember, the chair had exhibited disquieting, almost sentient behavior. At first, it was the little things, a slight tilt when he wasn't looking, a subtle creak that seemed to mimic a sigh. But soon, the anomalies grew bolder. One evening, as Jonathan sat watching television, the armchair slowly began to shift. Its wheels, long rusted and thought immovable, churned softly on the creaking floorboards. Startled, Jonathan leapt to his feet, only to watch in disbelief as the chair returned to its original position, as if nothing had happened. In the days that followed, Jonathan's life became a series of sleepless nights and unsettling episodes. The armchair moved on its own, sometimes inching towards him when he was lost in thought, other times rolling silently across the room as if guided by an unseen hand. Every movement was accompanied by a low, almost imperceptible hum, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the object. Jonathan's unease deepened with each unexplained motion until he could no longer tell whether the disturbances were real or the manifestations of his own mounting paranoia. Unable to ignore the phenomenon, he began to investigate. Jonathan spent hours recording the chair's movements, meticulously documenting each incident. He set up a series of cameras around his apartment, hoping to capture evidence of its spectral behavior. The recordings revealed patterns, a slow, deliberate crawl, a sudden jerk, and then an eerie stillness that followed. In one particularly chilling video, the chair rolled deliberately towards the door, paused as if to survey the empty corridor, and then retreated back into the shadows of the room. As weeks passed, Jonathan's grip on rationality began to slip. The armchair, once a mere piece of furniture, transformed in his mind into a malevolent entity, a guardian of dark secrets that haunted the very fabric of his existence. He found himself fixated on its every movement, the line between reality and delusion blurring in the dim light of his apartment. In desperate moments of solitude, he would murmur to the chair, questioning its purpose and pleading for an explanation. The responses were never verbal, instead, they came in the form of subtle shifts, as if the chair was communicating in a language beyond words. The terror of the shifting chair was not confined to physical disturbances alone, it seeped into Jonathan's psyche, sowing seeds of doubt and despair. He began to experience vivid nightmares where the chair took on grotesque, monstrous forms, its once comforting curves twisted into contorted expressions of malice. In these dreams, the chair whispered cryptic messages, urging him to remember long-buried secrets and confront the painful truths of his past. Every morning, he awoke drenched in sweat, the echoes of the chair's murmurs lingering in his mind like a persistent, unyielding reminder of unresolved dread. In a moment of fleeting clarity, Jonathan recognized that the chair was not merely an object, it was a vessel for the unresolved emotions and hidden traumas of those who had sat in it before him. Perhaps it had absorbed the sorrows of its previous owners, a silent witness to broken promises, lost love, and unspoken regrets. And now, that accumulated anguish was being released, enveloping him in a shroud of terror from which there seemed to be no escape. Fate, it seemed, had a way of intertwining the lives of those touched by the uncanny. One chilly November evening, as the winds howled like the voices of the forgotten, Marcus, Elaine, and Jonathan found themselves drawn together by an inexplicable force. A local paranormal investigator named Amelia had been collecting accounts of supernatural disturbances around the city. Her research led her to the commercial building haunted by ghostly footsteps, to the manor where an antique mirror held the secrets of a tragic past, and to the small apartment where an armchair moved with a will of its own. Amelia was no stranger to the eerie and the inexplicable, yet the convergence of these three narratives sent a shiver down her spine. Each story, though distinct, shared a common thread, the relentless, oppressive weight of an unseen presence that defied logic and reason. Determined to uncover the truth, she arranged meetings with each of the protagonists. Their accounts, when laid side by side, painted a portrait of a city steeped in lingering energies, residual echoes of lives once lived and tragedies long forgotten. In the abandoned corridors of the commercial building, Marcus recounted the steady cadence of ghostly footsteps that seemed to echo with the sorrow of a lost era. He spoke of how the very walls appeared to weep with memories of voices long silenced, each creak and groan a testament to the unresolved grief of the past. Amelia listened intently, her notebook filling with sketches of spectral figures and cryptic symbols that Marcus claimed had haunted his dreams. At the manor, Elaine revealed the haunting secrets of her family's mirror. She described how its surface transformed from a simple reflective glass into a portal of despair, capturing not just her own image, but the tormented soul of an ancestor whose story was steeped in forbidden love and betrayal. The mirror's whispers, she said, were like fragments of a long-lost lullaby, a mournful cadence that echoed the heartache of generations. As Amelia examined the mirror, she could almost sense the pull of history, a gravitational force that connected the present to a past shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, in Jonathan's cramped apartment, the shifting armchair had become an obsession, a living relic that defied the ordinary. His haunted eyes, worn by sleepless nights and the constant hum of its movement, told a story of a man slowly succumbing to the relentless pressure of an unseen adversary. His recordings, grainy yet undeniable, captured the chair's deliberate motions and the silent messages it conveyed. When Amelia viewed the footage, she was struck by the chair's eerie persistence, a symbol of how the remnants of past traumas could manifest in the most unexpected forms. That fateful evening, under a sky heavy with unspoken secrets, the trio gathered in a small, candlelit room at a local community center. In a tentative, almost reverent manner, they shared their experiences. As they spoke, it became clear that the supernatural was not a series of isolated incidents but a tapestry woven from the threads of fear, history, and unresolved longing. Each object, the ghostly footsteps, the sinister mirror, the shifting armchair, served as a conduit, channeling suppressed emotions and memories of those who had come before. In that moment of convergence, the boundaries between past and present began to blur. Marcus, Elaine, and Jonathan found a strange solace in one another's stories, as though their individual terrors were part of a larger, collective nightmare. They resolved to investigate further, driven by a desire not only to understand the forces that haunted them but also to confront the painful truths long buried beneath layers of fear and silence. Amelia, with her unwavering determination, became the guiding light for their joint inquiry, promising that together they might unravel the enigma of these ghostly echoes. Over the following weeks, the trio embarked on a journey into the heart of the supernatural. Guided by Amelia's meticulous research and their shared experiences, they delved into old archives, unearthed forgotten diaries, and traced the lineage of haunted objects. Their investigation led them to a startling revelation: the disturbances were not random occurrences but manifestations of an ancient curse, a lingering energy bound to places, objects, and even the very fabric of time itself. In the commercial building, Marcus discovered blueprints and records dating back to the early 1900s, speaking of a long-forgotten tragedy, a fire that claimed the lives of several workers, whose anguished spirits were said to roam the halls, forever bound to the site of their demise. He concluded that the ghostly footsteps were the restless echoes of those lost souls, their desire for recognition and redemption manifesting in a ceaseless march through the night. At the manor, Elaine uncovered a series of letters hidden within an old journal, which told a tale of forbidden love and bitter revenge, a romance that had ended in bloodshed and despair. The mirror, it seemed, had borne silent witness to these events, absorbing the sorrow and anger of a past that refused to be forgotten. Elaine's heart ached as she read the words, feeling the weight of generations of grief and regret. The mirror's reflections were not mere distortions of light but a reservoir of deep, unspoken emotion, a reminder that some wounds, once inflicted, never fully heal. Jonathan, too, found answers in unexpected places. In the dusty corners of his apartment, he discovered a faded photograph of a family gathered around the very armchair that now tormented him. The sepia-toned image revealed a family whose smiles were marred by silent sorrow. The chair, once a cherished possession and a seat of honor at family gatherings, had absorbed the unspoken tensions, the suppressed fears, and the lingering guilt of unresolved conflicts. That past now clung to the chair, transforming it into a vessel of perpetual unease. As their investigations deepened, the protagonists began to understand that the supernatural was not an external force but a mirror reflecting the hidden truths of the human soul. The haunted footsteps, the sinister mirror, and the shifting armchair were not merely objects of terror, they were manifestations of the inner battles waged by those who dared to confront the unknown. The ghosts they encountered were, in many ways, their own fears given form, the collective residue of history and memory that no one could escape. In a final, cathartic confrontation, the trio gathered at the epicenter of the commercial building, the very heart of the lingering curse. Under the flickering glow of a lone overhead light, they performed a ritual of remembrance, speaking aloud the names of those who had been lost, acknowledging the pain of the past, and offering forgiveness where it was long overdue. As their voices merged in a fragile chorus, a palpable shift filled the air, a quiet dissolution of the oppressive energy that had haunted them for so long. For one transcendent moment, the boundaries between the living and the spectral, the past and the present, faded away into a gentle silence. Even as the curse seemed to lift, a lingering question remained: could true peace ever be achieved when the echoes of fear and memory were so deeply woven into the tapestry of life? In the quiet moments of solitude that followed, Marcus, Elaine, and Jonathan each carried with them the indelible marks of their experiences. The city itself appeared forever changed, a landscape where the past lurked behind every shadow, where every creak of an old building or flicker of candlelight evoked a memory of what once was. They had learned that fear was not merely an emotion but a force, one that could seep into every facet of life, altering perceptions of reality and self. Their journey had revealed a profound truth: the supernatural, no matter how inexplicable, was intertwined with the human condition. The quest to understand the unknown, the battle between terror and curiosity, and the ultimate confrontation with one's inner demons were struggles as ancient as time itself. Even as they moved forward, the stories of haunted footsteps, sinister reflections, and shifting chairs would forever serve as reminders of the delicate balance between confronting fear and succumbing to it. Beneath the ever-watchful gaze of the night, in a world where memory and fear danced in an eternal waltz, the echoes of the past continued to whisper, a constant, subtle murmur that some mysteries are destined to remain unresolved, and that in the quiet persistence of the supernatural lay the very essence of what it means to be human.